I would like to introduce Mr. Gordon Inouye, who is our Hawaii Island Director, and he will be our host and moderator for the Breeders and Growers Forum. Mr. Gordon?
Thank you, Johnny. Aloha kakakiahaka. Welcome to the HFNA Breeders and Growers Forum. My name is Gordon Inouye, and I am your moderator for this forum. The goal of this forum is to bring breeders and growers together to share their perspective in the plant development field and their goals and concerns in reaching those goals. Today, we are very fortunate in having a broad range of forum members representing all of the major counties of Hawaii and some of the leading researchers in Hawaii agriculture. Please feel free to pose questions addressed to the panel or individual members via the chat window of the Zoom. Here with us live is, of course, your host, Mr. Johnny Gardinas. Johnny has been in agriculture for the past 44 years. Johnny served as manager of the UH-CTAHR Agricultural Research Center for CTAHR on Kauai, and after 32 years of service, retired to start his own farm growing tropical flowers and foliage on Kauai. Next to him is Peter Boches. Peter has a degree from Cornell and a master's and PhD from Oregon State University in plant breeding. With extensive plant breeding experience, he has spent the last 5 years at Hilo Orchid Farm as the production manager. Next to him is none other than Joanna Blosi. Where did she go? There she is. Hi, Joanna. Joanna is the Ornamental Entomology Extension Specialist at CTAHR. Her research includes developing resistant management strategies for control of thrips and chemical efficacy trials. Then we have none other than Russell Galante. Russell Galante is the CTAHR Extension Agent for Ornamental and Landscape Industries on the Big Island. His 17 years of experience in the green industry makes him a huge asset to the industry on the Big Island. At the very end there, Tong Thang Neo, otherwise known as Neo, originally from Singapore. Neo's been living here for 20 years. He is the general manager for Greenpoint Nurseries. He serves on many industry organizations, as well as being the chair for the HFNA Transportation Committee and co-chair of the R&D Committee. Joining us on Zoom are Tessie Amore. Tessie is well-known and respected researcher at UH Manoa, where she works in the Anthurium and Dendrobium orchid breeding program since 1985. Dr. Orville Baldos is a researcher in sustainable ornamental production at UH Manoa, specializing in native Hawaiian plant materials. Mario Gaggero is an agronomist and plant breeder and diversified farmer on Maui. They grow flowers for laymaking and kula and provide breeding services for the public. Mario enjoys collaborating with others to enhance farming in the islands in general. Hannah Lutkin is the Floriculture and Landscape Extension Agent for CTAHR on Maui. Her program focuses on efforts that support the floriculture and landscape industry statewide. Dr. Alberto Ricordi, I could start telling some jokes about Alberto, but I'll save it for another time. Alberto has 15 years of experience in the landscape and nursery industry in Hawaii. After earning his PhD from CTAHR, he became a licensed landscape architect and landscaping contractor. Last year, he returned to CTAHR as the Oahu County Extension Agent. Alberto works to apply his experience in the industry to support agriculture on Oahu and statewide. Now, we're very privileged to have such a great list. Oh, hold on. Dr. James Keach. James is the Extension Agent for Ornamental Crops and Master Gardener Coordinator for CTAHR on Kauai. James has a background in plant breeding and has a broad experience with a range of ornamental and edible crops. Matt Kiley runs Helani Farms in Hana, Maui with his wife BJ. They have an 8-acre tropical flower and foliage farm selling the majority of their products wholesale. Matt and BJ have been doing this for over 30 years. Are you there, BJ? or Matt? There he is. I'd like to start with Tessie because she's always one of the most engaging persons you can speak to on a forum like this. She does a lot of work, most of her work in the anthurium and dendrobium orchid field. Tessie, want to share some thoughts with us?
Yes, our goal is to generate or create flowers that our growers can produce and that the designers will buy. So it's great to have this forum so we can hear from the growers and the designers as to what are the products that are of interest to them.
Thank you, Tessie. Again, those are viewing us on Zoom. I'm sure you got a gazillion questions about orchids and anthurium. Feel free to propose those questions to us. Dr. Ballas Orville, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, thanks for inviting me in this forum. So yes, so yeah, I'd like to see what would be, I guess, up and coming, and like what would be interest in terms of plants for the growers. Yeah, and maybe something about native plants, trying to see whether we can introduce that into the nursery and also maybe the floriculture industry.
I think that would be very beneficial because, again, if we're using native plants for some of our potted material that are exportable, they'll be very, very unique and have no competition from similar growers on the mainland. Thank you, Oliver. On our local panel here, I know I asked Johnny yesterday in our rehearsal, what was important to you? And he talked about ants. What do you have in mind, Johnny?
Well, the reason I brought up ants is because ants, they herd aphids and mealybugs, and these spread more insects, and they spread diseases and stuff like that. So it's my dream that our researchers and extension agents can come up with a solution to stop the gathering and traveling and breeding of ants, so that we'll have less work to do in our post-harvest operations on all of our products, because it's very important. A lot of us growers, we export to the mainland on a weekly basis, and we have to have a clean product to continue to use our limited permit stamp. So that's why I brought up.
Thank you, Johnny. Of course, the counter to that question, Russell said, well, what about the uncles? Anyhow, Russell, since I've called upon you, some of your observations in cruising on Big Island nurseries?
Yeah, breeding is important, but from my end, because I'm not a breeder, I focus on other stuff. And right now, the biggest need is mass production of subsidized plant material, right? We want to get farms replanted with some of the crops that people really want. So I'm particularly now looking at how to use funding to get cheaper sources of plant material. So, you know, we're talking eucalyptus and myrtaceae plants, collaborating with Hawaii Tropical Flower Council. And then throughout this year and the upcoming years, I'm going to focus on virus-free production of red ginger to try to get fields replanted there. Right, breeding is really important, and getting new crops is important, and I can help from an extension side in that realm. But from my end, we're looking at stuff like helping Johnny keep aunts and uncles out of his fields, right? So I think white, if I want to see any plant, the number one crop that I keep getting asked about is a white pincushion leucospermum. So yeah, we got people over here waving their hands. And it seems like, you know, white's in because people want more white anthuriums produced. So we already have them bred, right? But we don't have enough production of it. So it's not just breeding, it's developing enough material at a price point that the growers are actually gonna buy it and be able to plant it.
While you're commenting on that, I think there is wide support within the breeders and growers here regarding having a tissue lab here that's able to economically produce these plants. Right now, because of low volume, the unit cost is so high. But your suggestion about subsidized support for the industry, I think is very, very important, and I hope that we collectively can do something. A little more on ants. Are fire ants a concern on Kauai, Johnny?
We do have, at this time, some fire ants, but nothing compared to what Hawaii Island, unfortunately, and to Oahu. So our Kauai Invasive Species Committee pretty much has the little fire ant under control at this time. They're not eradicated, but that's a goal. That's our goal, is to eradicate them.
Well, let's hope that we can come up with a unified program statewide to, number one, first control them, and number two, eradicate them. Yes. Neo, I know that we're glad to have you here because Neo had some very challenging health issues not too long ago, but he's alive and well and in good company today. Can you tell us some of the things that the growers are concerned about here from your standpoint?
I've been here for over 20 years now. So the last 20 years, I really saw is aging farmers. Yeah, we have a lot of aging farmers, and there's no younger farmers coming in to this industry. And another challenging part is, of course, you mentioned getting new plant material. And I know Dr. Tessie Amori has been helping us quite a bit to get new varieties to be released every year. Hopefully we get 2 to 3 varieties to release to the industry so we can keep up with the market. Because flowers is just a fashion. People are always asking for new things. Brown, light brown, green, white, different shades of white. Yeah, there are different shapes of white too. So it's kind of challenging for Dr. Tessie Amori, but I think she's on the right track. I think maybe Tessie later on can brief a little bit what she did. She's now working with a group of flower designers to predict or forecast trend coming up, or what kind of flowers, colors, shapes, anthuriums people like. Yeah. So what's the group called, Dr. Tessie Amori?
Oh, it's the Professional Advisory Team.
With a group of AIFD flower designer, right?
Yes, that's correct. We have AIFD floral designers locally and on the mainland as well as Canada, who help determine if the seedling selection, because remember, anthuriums take 14 years to, that's how we usually think it will take. And cloning takes about 3 years. So if we know what the designers want, then we can prioritize what to clone and get the materials ready to send out. And then hopefully that will speed up the variety that's going out. So definitely input from the end users have been very beneficial in determining what to clone and what to test. And that makes the growers happy because the growers can grow what the designers want. And so we keep the supply line, the pipeline actively with different varieties.
Thank you,
Yes.
Tessie. For everyone's information, Tessie recently achieved the AIFD status and is a certified floral designer too. So she's getting in on the ground floor to make sure she's in contact with the designers. That's a great. I'd like to call upon Ricardo Orville, excuse me, Alberto. I kept telling that I said I got a joke about Alberto, but I won't share with you now. But anyway, Alberto, you want to share some of your thoughts with us, please?
I would add to the ant problem. It's a big problem here in Oahu, especially the little fire ant is becoming a more and more serious issue. I don't know if it's good or bad, but we just had the infestation in Lanikai, a very affluent neighborhood in Oahu. and then it was in the news, and there was people talking about it because you talk about multi-million dollar houses getting infested and beach access being infested. And so I think we see happening over and over. Like we have new pests, new invasive species that are not taken seriously until they are out of control. It seems like it's a trend. Like it was like that with coconut rhinoceros beetle. It's happening with little fire ants here in Oahu. And one of the main challenges talking with the groups, like the agencies, like the Hawaii Ant Lab or the Oahu Invasive Species Council, that work with these invasive species full time, is that it takes community effort, like group effort. It's not just like one property here, one property there. To actually like effectively deal with these pests, it's like a systematic approach. Like you need a whole valley, a whole Ahupua, or a whole region to act together, because it doesn't make sense. It's not that it doesn't make sense. It's not effective to just eradicate, for example, ants from my property if my neighbor doesn't do anything, because they will just keep coming back. And then we will deal with rights to property access, and just like the logistics and the legalities of implementing effective methods of control for invasive species makes it very difficult. Like the technology is there, the methods of control is there. It's not like we as extension agents or the researchers have to develop new methods. It's just about the community and the agencies that control how we can implement the methods of control, like working together and not taking 10 years to do that until it's out of control.
Thank you, Alberto. I've got a
Yeah.
question for Matt Kiley. Matt, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Matt. Since you've been in probably
Can I
have
speak
the
to
longest history here, have you noticed any changes in the prevalence or severity of pests or disease in recent years? And if so, what do you attribute these changes to, Matt?
I'd like to speak to the previous thing about the ants. We had the fire ants over here in the Hiku, and the problem was that one of the owners, property owners, wouldn't allow the state to get in and eradicate them. But somehow, I think that there should be legislation where that is mandated, so that we can get access to eradicate these things. Like they did a great job out here finally, but it was touch and go. But as far as pests on a farm, I think the most important thing is to keep your organic waste out of the fields. You know, your byproduct of the harvest. We bring everything in now, and we dispose of it at the landfill, and that's helped us a lot, especially with that the red ginger viruses. So I think that's the answer. Keeping your things clean is the answer.
Good point. The subject of the red ginger virus is something that we've heard a lot from Russell in recent years. And how many different viruses have you found, Russell?
6, Gordon. Wait, that's 7.
6. 6 different
Yeah.
problems.
2 new to science.
Yeah.
We named them.
And of all the samples he's tested, there wasn't a single sample that didn't have at least one virus infection.
Yeah, luckily Hannah found us some though. So we have 6 virus-free plants.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thanks to Hannah,
Hannah,
we've got some virus-free.
That's a good opportunity for you to chime in a little bit and talk about the red ginger that you found virus-free.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks everyone for having me today. It's good to see everyone and talk story. I also agree with Matt Keeley that clean plants is imperative, and even keeping your plants. So for instance, if you are importing new plants, I think it's very important to have kind of a quarantine section in your nursery. So you get those imported plants in and you just let them do their thing, watch them, monitor them for several weeks, just to make sure that they don't have any pest or disease issues, because that's one of the riskiest pathways to introduce a new pest or pathogen to your farm. So clean plants is really important, and inspecting the plants, quarantining them. Also on the note with Russell's red ginger viruses, I was very happy to help with that. I live in Haiku, which is on the windward side of Maui. And on the property we live at, it used to be an old historical flower farm. Matt Keeley knows the previous owner. But I just monitor them. I'm very clean. Every time I go to harvest, I make sure with my isopropyl alcohol to clean my pruners. I think cleaning your pruners, I know life is short, but if you have time to really sanitize your pruners, I think that's really huge. And removing excess weeds so that your plants can stay healthy and thrive is really helpful. I'm happy those plants are virus-free, Russell. Happy to give you more anytime.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I have another question here, which I'd like to pose to Mario Gaggero. Mario, you with us?
Yep.
Yeah, Mario, what source of information and support do you rely on for guidance on pest and disease management? And I know it's probably Hannah, but I'd like to hear it in your own words.
Right. No, I rely on them, in several of my crops for advice. And then, just reading about, in online and books. Yeah.
Is there anything else?
No, that's it.
Yeah. I know that you're an agronomist and a plant breeder as well as a farmer on Maui. Tell us some of the crops that you grow there.
So I grow. I have a farm. I bought a business a year ago from Rasmussen. So I have all the plumeria trees. Some other lay making trees like crown flowers and limas and tea leaves but my specialty is actually tuberos. I do a couple of acres tuberos as much as Maui can take. I also have a separate part of the business, like I grow crops, mostly in winter time, multiplying crops, seed crops. But it's always around flowers too, because when you cross corn or soybeans or sunflower or seed, you're always around flowers. I like to think that I'm a flower farmer now. One of the things, I was listening to all of you. One of the things about breeding, or one of the things that I struggle with is how to, when I need to grow the business, like what kind of things, what kind of crops, flower crops should I grow? And we all have infinite amount of some amount of time that we can work on things, and then the palette of product is so big, and so if we do trial and error, will take me forever. So some things that I always talk to Hannah is like, we need to get a grant and start introducing more other more flower crops. Some of them might have been in Maui 23 years ago, but something like we need to put an effort in introduction of new crops, new flower crops again, and try to produce more locally, and try to push out imports and try to provide locally and also export. That's what I'm passionate about, and hopefully we can get it done soon.
Thank you, Mario. Appreciate your input. I've got a question I'd like to pose to Peter. It's actually Dr. Peter Boches, since he has a degree from Cornell, a master's and a PhD from Oregon State University. Actually, I have almost several questions here. What are the most common pests and disease you encounter, and how do you currently manage them? And the second part of that is, what's your biggest challenge in managing that when you have no access to chemicals when you need them? Chemicals cost consideration and resistant plant populations. Do you have alternative methods to chemicals, et cetera? And I've got a third question, but I'll save that for after you address yourself to these.
We're a Hilo orchid farm is mainly an oncidium grower. We also have large amounts of Cattleya and Catasetum orchids. Our main diseases are bacterial rots in oncidium and to a lesser extent fusarium and other fungal diseases in oncidium. And our main pest would probably be spider mite, two-spotted spider mite on the Catasetums, and also thrips on oncidium and Miltonia. And I'd say, chemical cost is a concern, but we really try to operate with an integrated pest management strategy because it's more effective, and we don't want to expose workers to pesticides, and we're wary of environmental concerns. So we do a lot of monitoring of pest populations. We have sticky cards everywhere, and we just try to control watering and sanitation as far as other environmental factors that can induce disease, and monitoring pest populations and really targeting hitting them when they're just starting to appear.
Thanks, Peter. It's misery loves company. And whenever you have a product and you know that you're struggling with some of those issues, it's good to know that others are addressing those same issues. And I know we've collaborated with your owners for years past. I do remember James when he first came over here and started his nursery, and so we've been fairly close for years and years. And what are your thoughts on orchid breeding and developing new orchid hybrids?
Yeah, I mean, to echo a little bit of what Neo said, the ornamental industry or the floriculture industry is always looking for novelty. So we're always trying to anticipate, 5, 10 years ahead in terms of our own breeding programs. We're looking for cultivars, but we're looking for things that flower almost continuously, that have multiple flower spikes per plant, novel colors, and then there's a general trend towards more compact plants that can be shipped with internet sales.
I know, grow fast, have many spikes, and get to market quickly.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And command a premium price.
Right.
I know. Anyway, that's a goal of all breeders, I'm sure. From a grower standpoint, of course, you're looking for the same thing too. Thank you, Peter. James from Kauai. Would you share some thoughts with us? In your opinion, what are the key factors affecting the sustainability and long-term viability of farming in your area?
I mean, I think one of the things that I see coming up is cost of land, cost of facilities. I think it's just a huge issue, not just on Kauai, although I think land prices here have been on a rise, but I think across the state, as anyone doing any sort of production here can talk about. I do see, to some degree, there's always the challenges, right, of import replacement things. Where are we bringing in other plants or flowers from, and are those things that could be produced locally? Are these ones that there can be local competition to, essentially, where we're also reducing the chance of bringing in pests and diseases on that? That being said, I hear a lot from folks about still wanting to kind of increase that diversity, that kind of, as the discussion's been going about, keeping things going in a fashion industry. One of the first things I heard when I started in this position was stakeholder groups talking about writing grants to get new materials and trying to invest in folks like Tessie who are developing new materials. And I just wanted to add while I had the floor too, that Hawaii still has a really great reputation internationally in terms of the work that's been done developing plants here. As many of y'all might know, I worked in Singapore before I came here, and it was really interesting seeing how many of the Dendrobium cultivars, Vanda cultivars, things like that that are still used in the cut flower industry were ones that were developed from Hawaii, and some of which now as breeding stock are still fetching premium prices. I saw a plant that I think 4-inch pot for $5,000 from an old UH breeding line. So there's, just still a lot of demand, and kind of like Mario was saying, sort of sometimes reviving these things that are around, but that just people have kind of forgotten about or a generation hasn't been exposed to.
Thank you, James. I'd like to address something to Joanna. You're the entomologist in this whole forum, and many of the discussions have dealt with the question regarding pests and things along that line. In general, what should we be doing? Is there something legislatively that we can do? I know that Mario Matt talked about the issue of some landowners not permitting the state to enter their property to manage these pests. And of course, when that happens, it becomes a breeding ground and a source of contamination for the entire environment. Overall, what are some of your thoughts on what we can do or should be doing or addressing ourselves to from an organizational standpoint, from an educational standpoint in entomology?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've already talked on a few of these things have come up already. I know we talked about sanitation and how important that is, so prevention essentially. Peter mentioned IPM and how it has to be an integrated approach. It can't just be legislative, it's got to be kind of everything. Alberto did talk too about kind of the government side of things and how I think over the last few years, because of budgetary issues, we've had constraints in inspection and things like that. So I would like to know personally with this group, like if the impact of invasive, if they've noticed a trend over the recent years of it going up or being more of an issue, and if it's a growing concern or kind of staying the same, and then what are ways we can help with that. I always believe an ounce of prevention helps in the long run, so that's kind of my philosophy there. I think Extension does a really good job of going and having relationships with growers so we can have early detection and rapid resolution essentially to these issues. So if that means a quarantine or helping a grower in a certain way, and hopefully it's all these branches, state, federal, government, that can help these growers in that way. But again, having really good sanitation from the start, I know it's labor intensive, but it will go a long way. I hope that was.
Thank you, Joanna.
Yeah.
In the recent past, you've gave a presentation about your experiments with the silicon treatment. Would you like to share your research and results with this forum?
Sure, yeah. So we have some new results, and I'm so grateful. A lot of collaborators, I've done farm trials with them, and they're here on this panel. So we have Neo, Greenpoint, we have Peter from Hilo Orchid Farm, and we have you, Gordon, from PFP. And we're seeing very positive results in one aspect if it's used in a certain way. So I would say any substance you apply, chemical or otherwise, how you apply it is just as important as the active ingredient. And Peter talked on this as well. What stage of the insect pest life cycle are you hitting? At what density? How good is your monitoring? So we found that silicon works well if you have something present, almost more therapeutically than prophylactically, even though the research typically thought it was best used prophylactically. If you're going to use it that way, then rate becomes very important. So you want a low rate, because at too high a rate or at a mid rate for too long, we started to see toxicity. And that was the first time in 2 to 3 years of doing this research that we started to see toxicity. But that's good for us to know, because we were doing it in greenhouses and labs. So in the field where the conditions vary a lot, we were starting to see some of that toxicity. It was kind of a hot year as well, so that probably contributed as well. So how we use this product still needs a lot more development, and that's why research is kind of a slow process. We know breeding can be a slow process. So a lot of times we rely on grower ingenuity to help us with this stuff. And that's why this collaboration with growers is so important. But yeah, that's kind of the short
Thank you,
answer.
Joanna. So like I say, God bless you. These are things that we never would have thought of had you not had the initiative to start those trials. So we appreciate your ingenuity there.
Sure.
I have a general question that I want to pose to the growers here, and I'd like to get input from as many of you as possible. What are the main challenges you face in your farming operation, and how do you prioritize them? We all know there are many, but how do you prioritize those challenges? Neil, who want to start?
I think our challenges, one of them, big one, maybe labor. We cannot do without our workers. Our workers are very important to us for our business. So we spend a lot of time working with them, talking to them once a year, at least do evaluation, every one of them. We treat them like a family. I think if you take care of them well, I think they will stay and work for a long time too.
Good philosophy, Neil. Take care of them, and then that's part of the solution there.
Because laborers are hard to come now, and it's harder and harder to get. Younger generations may not want to do farming at all. So challenges for us is how to keep them, keep them working for a long time. How to take care of them, because they have to take care of the family too, right?
That is so true.
Yeah.
Just for your information, there is a program that's being developed right now to develop apprentices in the various ornamental industries. Hopefully that'll be funded and hopefully give us the opportunity to bring in the next generation of growers, because I know you said, the aging of the farmers, and nothing could be more true than moi.
Still young yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Peter, want to address the issue too about the main challenges you face in your farming operation?
I would agree with Neo that labor is a huge one. Also supply chain stuff. Sometimes we're waiting a long time on being able to receive something. New pests too, to echo some of what Joanna said. It's probably beating a dead horse, but having better border enforcement for plant inspection stations coming into Hawaii to keep invasive pests out, and facilitating the legal entry of good, clean plant material so that people aren't as motivated to illegally bring in plant material.
Thank you, Peter. Well, at least Hilo Orchid Farm has a generational succession in place there, so that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Mario and Matt, any thoughts?
In my case, I'm new in the flower business, so for me the biggest challenge is how to how to market all these products that are kind of phased out, like plumeria cuttings. Trying to find new market. That's been a huge challenge for me in the last couple of years. The other one is cost. It's insane how from I don't know. I'm looking back a couple of years ago. Drip tape double, fertilizer triple. I mean, everything is going and keeping up with labor. I mean, you have to start paying, wages that are comparable with, you're competing with hotels and all of that. And there is a point where business, ag business are a low margin most of the time, and you gotta compete with that. So those are the main things. Pests, yes, I think pests are one of the challenges, but I kind of assume you're in a tropical environment, you're gonna have to deal with pests and new pests all the time. I mean, there's no winter. But my main things are marketing and cost. Yeah, those are mine.
Mario, just for your information, we had a research seminar last month, was it? Last month, and one of the presenters was Dr. Criley, and I'm sure that Hannah can probably give you access to it. He has categorized a number of different plumeria plants and has certain qualities that I think would be very beneficial to your plumeria
Okay.
growing operation. So Hannah could probably point you in the right direction there.
All right.
Yeah. Matt, any thoughts on this issue of the challenges you face in your farming operation?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Mario. The fertilizer costs have gone up. Everything's gone up. My biggest problem right now is rain. We're not having the rain we need, so I'm spending a tremendous amount of money on water, which I really haven't spent this much in the 35 years I've been doing this. It's nuts. It's hard.
Yeah.
And then that affects. There's nothing like rain. Pennies from heaven. You can't. Irrigation doesn't duplicate rainfall, and so your production falls off. Plants are under stress. You're under stress.
Matt, I empathize with you and appreciate you bring. I laugh because sometimes I get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go check the weather report and see where we are. Our nursery is totally off grid. We are dependent on catchment as well as power. And we have 60,000 gallons of storage, but when we go a week without any rain, boy, we're hurting big time. We have to start rationing our irrigation, and you hate to have to do that. Thank you. What do growers look for when they consider new varieties versus what the breeders are looking for? And it's one of those key questions. From a grower standpoint, we're always hoping that breeders are breeding for things that will work for us, and I'm not totally sure that occurs. I know that Tessie reaches out to the ultimate consumer to find out what the market wants in terms of the breeding and tries to focus her breeding targets in that respect. And we heard Peter say that I know they're famous for their own hybridizing of their line, and trying to think 10 to 20 years downstream. And but from a grower standpoint, what are your thoughts on that, Peter?
Well, I know it from both sides because I've been like a professional blueberry breeder for 5 years before I was in this orchid production role, and the blueberry growers always told me, we get paid by the pound, Peter. So as the grower, I'm always happy when something is just wants to live, wants to grow, is trouble-free, doesn't get pests and diseases easily. And a lot of times that's in opposition to the traits that breeders are looking for. The new flower color always is a little more susceptible or something.
Good points there. Mario, I know you're a breeder also, so do you want to chime in on that issue?
What was the question, sorry?
It's a question of, what do growers look for when they consider new varieties versus what the breeders are looking for? But you're a grower, breeder, and so.
Well, I think you gotta be in tune. If you wanna be successful at doing it, you're gonna be in tune of what the market or what the customer wants. And again, when you find some characteristics that are very desirable, like color, it might not come with the whole package of disease resistance, or it's a struggle to get those in. So it takes time to get the right flower or the right characteristics all together, right?
Yeah. Neil, from a grower standpoint, what are your thoughts on this issue of breeding versus?
For us, we do not breed, but we are one of our cooperators with a UH breeding program, interim breeding program. So what we regularly do is Dr. Tessia Mori will visit us. We'll provide data, give her feedback. So how the plant grows, whether it's blight resistant or nematode resistant, straight stem, crooked stem, whether any cracking on the spade, and flower color too, and the longevity. So these are the things that we look for.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Given the state of the industry right now, in Anthurium right now, the market is so short on supply that yield is one of the most important issues in terms of stems, you know, and so I know that's a pressure in terms of growing, whether you want more yield or you want more variety. And so, you know, it's always a challenge.
Yeah, it depends on the variety, yeah. So some varieties give you 6, 7 flowers a year, and some obakis maybe only give you 3 to 4 flowers a year. You know, so yeah, depends what you want to grow. Yeah, right.
Yep, I know.
Yeah.
Well, years and years ago, when supply was readily available, I know that we used to have our own little breeding program, but just being able to introduce a new variety, regardless of whether it's a UH variety or not, was always an important marketing aspect of the program. Russell, what are your observations on this question?
My observations are that we need to give Tessie more minions so that she can do more breeding, I think. And we need to get James back to breeding and have him sign a contract that he's going to breed at least some ornamentals. So, and then probably you could, just more breeders, I think, is important from a university standpoint. But maybe it was you, James, that said, you know, breeding is moving away from universities and moving more towards private industry. It seems like it's harder and harder to get a breeding program going at the public university level. And maybe I'm off on that, James and Tessie.
I know it's something that's been told to me a lot, and we've had some spirited discussions, I should say, you know, with colleagues at UH and other places too. I think historically, one of the great things that have come out of university breeding programs are these sort of long-term goals, you know, things that would not necessarily be immediately profitable for a commercial breeding operation, but that has some incredible benefit down the road. Trying to bring in disease resistance from a distantly related relative, trying to bring in a new flower color again from something, you know, where there might be some genes that are sort of linked to it in a challenging way. And so we have seen a lot of, you know, moving more and more towards privatizing in the floral breeding industry, just like I think in other breeding industries. And it is frustrating, you know, because I think there's sort of this assumption that the private sector will totally take over, but, you know, if it's driven by profit, you start to miss out on some of these longer term goals that have great profit potential down the road, but might take another 20, 30 years on top of that, you know, 14 years of developing new cultivar. So there's tons of room for improvement. And, you know, especially here with our somewhat unique climate, especially in the US, we have the potential to really, I think, take lots of different crops in new exciting directions and corner sorts of different markets. It's just a matter of resources, like you said, you know, getting people, you know, land, all these things that we need to kind of get those going.
Well, yeah, getting the
I tell
funding.
folks, like, it's like that old funding, yeah. It's that old saying, right, about, you know, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The best time to plant a tree is today. You know, I think keeping that mentality in mind with a lot of research, but breeding especially just because of that time.
Thanks, James. Yes, Johnny.
I have a comment. Since I'm a tropical flower farmer, I would like to get opinion of our researchers and our breeders, being a grower. I know we do a lot of hybridization and breeding of orchids and anthuriums. What about heliconias, like heliconias and orthotrichas? The last time that we got new varieties of these was on a collection trip to Central and South America. So is that possible? I know they do flower, but is there any light at the end of this tunnel for the future, since we are a fashion industry? Did I stump you on that one?
No, I didn't know if that was the answer or not. I think we need the funding, and right, like somebody would take it up. But right now, we've just got limited programs with so few people, with so few resources to do breeding programs. We have to focus on certain things. And maybe the solution is to look at what's out there available right now, because we may be able to bring in varieties that are being bred in programs that are doing heliconia breeding. But you know, to start a new program up, it's going to take a lot of resources, and so the problem there is just getting those resources. Yeah.
So are there places like in Central America and Costa Rica and places like that that are doing hybridizing with heliconias and orthotrichas, those kind of pseudocorums, those sort of flowers? Because
To my
I
knowledge,
don't see a lot of new varieties besides
can-
the ones we've already established through the
I can
years.
I can probably answer that, in that I've had some experience in Central America, and that there are so many cultivars and available in the wild that rather than trying to hybridize, they're out selecting and growing, commercially those varieties that they find in the wild. So I'm not aware of any hybridization program actively going on in Central America. And this is Costa Rica, which is probably one of the most advanced countries there. So,
Remember many years ago, that's where we received our original orthotrichas, was taking trips with Dr. Fred Berry to Central America. And that's how we brought in all the orthotrichas. And that's actually what they did. We had researchers from Kauai and Oahu that went out there into the jungles and they just looked all around, and when they saw something different, they dug up that rhizome and they brought it back, and it had to be quarantined, of course, until it was ready to transfer. I don't know if you remember Dr. Fred Berry, Tessie?
I think I've heard of him, and I remember it was, I believe, in either the early 90s when Roy Yamakawa was still
Right, and Roger
collecting.
Peckinpah. Roger Peckinpah
Yes.
also went.
So I remember that. But that goes back to one of our bottlenecks, and I think Russell mentioned that earlier, is that once we have the material that you bring in, how do you get enough volume to produce that the growers can grow them?
Yeah, well,
Because it's one thing to bring in one plant, and then if you're going to do it vegetatively, it's going to take a number of years to get a commercial crop. So I think with whatever introductions, because certainly introductions are one way to bring in what's up and coming, and then see if it's adapted to Hawaii. Granted, we're aware of invasive species and invasiveness. That's another thing with introductions. But if we can bring in new materials and then propagate them, because even with our eucalyptus, we just recently concluded a eucalyptus program. Again, the bottleneck is getting enough materials. So I think along with the breeding program is a propagation program that can get the critical mass out, because you can't sell like 10 plants. I remember when we were testing materials, one of our cooperators said, I can't do a test run when you only send me 60 plants or something like that, and they mature at different times. So definitely getting the mass propagation back into our radar will help everybody, I think.
That's correct. We did that when they first brought them in many, many years ago, Roy Yamakawa folks. After they were quarantined and we were able to put them out in the field, we brought them to the Kauai Branch Station. And you only have a handful of plants, but eventually they were distributed throughout the entire state of Hawaii. But like you say, like anything else, anthuriums and orchids, it takes years. So we got to start sometime, somewhere. And I understand, too, that labor and funding, like Russell mentioned, is very critical to establishing new varieties for our fashion industry.
Thank you, Johnny. It was interesting that we drifted onto this subject because one of the viewers asked, Johnny, does he work with any new heliconia or ginger varieties, or is he focusing on tried and true? I think our discussion here adequately answered that question. Thank you. Dr. Baldos, tell us a little bit more of your native plants. And again, also, the second part of that is that, I think it's very unique that you're experimenting with these, and the marketability, exportability of some of these plants, I think it piques my interest right now. Can you explain about your work with the native plants?
So right now, I'm looking at native plants that can be used indoors and also outdoors in the landscape. I did present some research updates, I guess last month, and my focus right now is looking at variegated plants because most natives are kind of just green. So we're looking at selections that have a little bit of color. And one of the challenges though with variegation, like trying to select for variegation, is that since they lose their chlorophyll levels at a certain time, they don't grow as fast. So that's one of the biggest challenges with our stuff. Another thing I think that I see with challenges with natives is it's kind of like a chicken or an egg thing. Like, so I kind of produce the new material, but if nobody picks it up, then it doesn't make any like it doesn't get transferred to the grower. So yeah, that's another challenge that I'm kind of seeing with natives.
Thank you. This is a general question that I can pose to both the researchers, breeders, and the farmers. How have changing weather patterns and climate variability impacted your farming practices and decision, both from a breeding standpoint and also from a growing standpoint?
Well, for me, we live in Upper Kapahi on Kauai, and we get a lot of rain. That's why I like to come to Hilo. But my suggestion, because of the weather changes and not enough rainfall, it does rain a lot on our farm in Upper Kapahi, but in the same breath, I have installed irrigation throughout my entire farm in case there comes a time when we don't have rain. So that's my suggestion, to just be prepared for the worst.
Thank you, Johnny. Peter, orchids are very microclimate sensitive. So in terms of your breeding, do you take these things into consideration?
No, we really try and just control the environment as much as possible. And Hawaii has so many little microclimates, and the weather's so variable. It's like, if you don't like the weather, wait a minute, wait a day, you know. But we're always watching the weather and trying to anticipate in terms of our integrated pest management. That's really important, whether we decide to water or fertilize. We're always sort of dialing those things in or down depending on temperatures and anticipated humidity.
Thank you, Peter. From an entomological basis, Joanna, what do you think the effect is going to be on agriculture in Hawaii with the changing weather patterns? And like you say, we have seasonal El Nino, La Nina, and also the weather, global warming issues to address ourselves to.
Yeah, I'm not a climate scientist, and I am relatively new to Hawaii, but it's going to be interesting to see how resilient or sensitive Hawaii's ecosystems are to the changing patterns overall. I think we're in one of the worst droughts in a few years, and Matt mentioned this as well. And if an ecosystem, if minor changes to it cause big disruptions, that could be very difficult. From an entomology perspective, those abiotic factors are really going to affect the plant's health, and then you're going to have secondary pest outbreaks, which will be secondary to the abiotic stressors. Abiotic stressors are bigger stressors for the plant than any biotic stressor, and we tend to forget that because we are so focused on the biology the biological part of it. So it's going to be difficult, and then additionally with the supply chain issues that were being mentioned as well, and the cost of management of these things, and the difficulty of getting labor and labor costs. So I think we're already seeing that these issues getting exacerbated, and I think what we're seeing, the impact of that is fewer new farmers, which Neo mentioned as well. So it's a really complex issue, and it's something I'm concerned about. One way, again, I always go back to prevention, and that's, not bringing in any new invasives. And that takes a huge effort through a lot of different organizations, state, local, and federal government, and others.
The planning should be 3, 6, 9, 12 months as opposed to 5 years or 10 years, I guess.
I would, yeah, have a short term and long term as well. Like Johnny mentioned, he gets a lot of rain, but he was able to put in irrigation. So on those good years you have, plan for the bad years, when you
Understand.
might have a shorter profit margin.
Thank you, Joanna.
Mm-hmm.
Russell, in your 17 years of experience, what have been your observations and your thoughts on farming practices?
Related to climate change or just
Yeah,
in general?
related to climate change, yeah.
I think it's the biggest problem is when we have extreme weather events, right? That's it, especially in Hawaii, like Joanna's saying, I've only been here since 2016 and I'm not a climate scientist, but the biggest issues growers tend to have is when there's these major weather events that cause huge issues, like I consider drought a major weather event as well, but especially windstorms, increased hurricanes is probably going to be an issue that we're dealing with, and the damaging effects there, droughts which are leading to fire damage, and I don't know, maybe I'll punt it to like Hannah or Alberto as extension agents to what they're dealing with on their islands. Yeah.
I hear you. Neil, what are your thoughts?
Climate change are here, so I think what businesses got to do, they have to harden their farm, for good and for bad. Sometimes you can get extreme heat or you get a lot of rain. So you have to be prepared, whether to get a storm, when the storm comes, you have to be ready too. So I think we continuously try ways to harden any opportunity we have to harden the farm. Make the greenhouse, make the shade house stronger, more drainage, and so on and so on. Yeah.
Thank you, Neil. Matt, over in Hana, what are your thoughts on this issue about
I'm
weather?
in agreement with Johnny. I've been working on increasing my irrigation to the whole farm due to the reduced rainfall over the 30 years I've been here. That's the biggest thing. And then you also have to, with reduced rain in the last three or 4 months here, you have to adjust your harvesting schedule to, we go out earlier in the morning and stop in the middle of the day just because the plants are under stress, flowers and whatnot. That's another aspect of climate change we're dealing with.
Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome.
Hannah, from your experience in working with the farmers on Maui, what are your thoughts on climate change and challenges that it poses?
Yes, I concur with many folks, Matt, Neo, Russell, Joanna. I think especially after the Maui wildfire natural disaster, that increased resiliency is huge. So having more water tanks, having more irrigation, having fire-wise plantings, maybe incorporating windbreaks into your farm, fire breaks, fuel breaks, and also having weather stations. I know Joanna uses those for monitoring pest populations. I think on the prevention scale, if you can monitor the weather, be ahead of everything, and really prepare and set yourself and your farm up for success, we can kind of evolve and adapt and hopefully learn how to continue growing and being resilient despite the climate change, drought, and increased weather events.
Thank you, Hannah. On the island of Kauai, James, what are your thoughts in terms of how we address this going forward?
So, going to a little bit of plant breeding background history, I know talking with folks who were doing vegetable breeding, one of the things they've said in terms of their breeding process has been for things like hurricanes, like Russell mentioned, trying to breed stronger roots, breed for more flexibility, less brittleness. And I think, with a 14-year timeline for Anthurium cultivar release or, similar things for some of these other plants we're working with, maybe those breeding goals are, a few decades away from being realized, but then seeing how we can support some of those things through other actions in the meanwhile, and starting to just screen materials for some of these traits that we see are going to be happening. You know, there's a lot of great science on water use efficiency, I think, in various plants, and you know, a lot of work done on how to measure some of these things. I think here, you know, there's always active discussion also about the tourist industry and how to kind of interface with that. You know, that uses a lot of resources, some of which farmers need as well, you know, growers need, florists need. And so kind of having some of those conversations as a community as well, to how to get everyone their equal share or their rightful share.
Thank you, James. Dr. Well, I have to tell the story. I can't keep skipping over it. But we were having dinner in Waikoloa a couple of months ago, and we were all gathered there, and my associate, our you know, Eric Inouye was there, and he greeted Alberto. It's Alberto Riccardi. He says, "Ricardo, nice to see you." And of course, it was an Italian restaurant, and I'm reading the menu there, and I was thinking of having, what do you call it? Alfredo, spaghetti Alfredo. And I corrected Eric, says, "No, it's not Ricardo, it's Alfredo." And so, again, good old Alberto took the says, no, guys, it's Alberto. So Alberto, what's your take on climate change? Thank you. I'm sorry I laughed at it, but I mean, it's such
No problem.
You're such a
That
good
happens
sport
all the
about
time. My department chair in a party, like in a celebration, yelled across the parking lot, "Ricardo, how you doing?"
Okay. Okay. Anyway, thank you for being such a good sport. Would you like to address the issue of, again, with your landscaping background and architectural background, how do you address this issue of changing weather patterns?
I did a needs assessment earlier this year, and one of the questions was, what is the most important, what are the most important traits for new varieties for the industry? And drought tolerance was rated the highest. And partly, especially in Oahu, with the red hue leak problems that triggered a annual increase in water costs. So I've seen in growers meetings, like in farmers meetings, that coming up a lot on how to try to, like, at least for the growers, give a break from the scheduled, I think 5 to 10% water increase in the next several years. So that definitely, I think, talking about like breeding and growers, I have no doubt and have like some sort of survey indicating that at least the local market, especially in Oahu, like the landscape local market, you'll be looking for plants that needs less water. So that's a trait to look at. And a lot of the market buys what designers specify, right? And there are also a lot of laws and regulations that require or strongly encourage like drought tolerant plants. So that's another thing to look at along with native plants. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Alberto.
And just one more thing, I just had like three calls this past 2 weeks of landscape contractors asking to like help, and lack of water was like, like landscape designs that were designed but that require like daily a lot of irrigation, and they like, oh, what do we do now? Like, and then we come back, well, increase your watering time.
Yeah.
So I think it comes along with like education, right? So that people understand like what they're getting into.
Thank you, Alberto.
They select different plants.
I heard on the news this morning that the Big Island is asking its consumers to reduce water usage by 10%. But the shocking thing I heard was that close to 50% of the Big Island population are on catchment. I was startled by that number. But in any event, I'm sure that's impacting the population very severely. We're down to the last 5 minutes of our forum here, and I do have a couple of questions, but I wanted to ask the forum members if there are any issues or questions that you'd like to pose to the rest of the team here. Don't speak all at once.
I just kind of wanted to add to the hurdles that growers and exporters are facing nowadays, and the resolutions to those things. Of course, Hannah mentioned, and also Russell, that field sanitation is very important, and controlling your pests and insects and diseases on a pre-harvest level. That's one of our biggest hurdle. But to me, the biggest hurdle, and it was mentioned, is the cost of production nowadays. Everything has gone up, and I'm sure Neil can testify to that. So our business has had no choice but to raise our prices, because we're not in business just to be sustainable. We're in business to be profitable. And if a farmer makes money, he'll farm. If he doesn't make money, it's just a hobby.
That's so true. Again, one of the questions I have here is that, how do you see the role of government policies and support in influencing your farming decisions and outcomes? And obviously, you've already answered that. The bottom line's got to be there. Otherwise, you won't plant, you won't grow. You look for something that will work. And I know Neo is on the Transportation Committee, and no matter how hard he negotiates with FedEx, they said, well, we'll only raise it 5% this year, year after year after year.
UPS just announced they're raising 6.3%.
Oh, 6.3%.
For UPS starting December 3rd.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Anyhow.
So I'm sure FedEx is going to follow.
Yeah.
6.2.
6.2? Okay, thank you for correction.
Well,
No, FedEx will say 6.2.
Oh, FedEx says 6.2.
They're still the better one.
Like I say, we have 2 or 3 minutes, and I'm going to even speak on this issue of the role of government policies. We would not be in business today were it not for the support of the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, having people like Joanna, Russell, Hannah, and James as resource people. Without them, I don't know where we would be. Without the support of Tessie Amore and a breeding program, and Oliver Balos in his native plant program, I don't know where those industries would be. Just kind of barely struggling along and trying to make, with old varieties. And these people are obviously supported by our state government, and it's very, very important that we support them so that we can continue to have those resources available. Russell talked about tissue culture. This is something close and dear to my heart, because just about every program we have, needs to be able to translate research that these people have put forth into active production in as short a time as possible. I joke with Tessie, what's the time frame between selection and commercial operation? 14 years, something along that line, Tessie? Yes.
Yes, something along that line. So the goal is to shorten that.
Yes.
And what I'd like to say is that, we really, and I think the end users, the florists, etc., we are also very interested to know the stories that we can then pass on to our consumers of what efforts are being made. I think that's really the connectivity between all of us is very important, because we can be part of your marketing tool, the actual end users. So please include us in the conversation from time to time. We really love it when we are included, especially working with Tessie and giving some feedback on the new varieties that are coming up. So thank you all.
So again, thank you all for being part of this forum. And again, please support your ag organization. We're from Hawaii Floriculture and Nursery Association, and we'll be putting forth a number of of legislative programs supporting agriculture, support our College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, and the University of Hawaii, as well as the Pacific Basin Research Center. So I think we've just about used up our time, and I see it's 2:45. So with that, I will say aloha and thank you for being with us today.